My space, your space, your space, my space, our space. OneSpaceLove, OneSpaceLove, OneSpaceLove.
Welcome, Ben Lee, to OneSpace Love Show. How are you?
I am good. Thank you for having me.
Oh, well, we have a story with that, don't we, Ben?
Well, you know, sometimes like everything's an adventure, you know, it's got bumpy sections and, you know, we figure it out eventually.
Yeah, I was thinking, will I get to say this live with everyone? You were the first, I created this show during COVID in my bedroom, and Ben Lee was the first person, because we had done so much work together with OneSpace. So I thought, I'll reach out, I'll aim high, I'll reach out to Ben Lee. He said, yes, sure. And I forgot, we did a beautiful interview, actually. As nervous. I'm not nervous today, but I was so nervous that day. I don't know if you felt it.
Well, you got more of them under your belt by this point.
Yeah, I know. Oh my gosh. I've interviewed some great creative souls. And I didn't know what I was doing when I interviewed you. Like, what am I doing? And I forgot to press record. And then, you know, we just got in this whirlwind of life. And Ben and I, this is the first time we've got to schedule on both our schedules to catch up. So thank you so much.
That's good. I wanted to leave it enough time so that it wasn't like a repeat, because just doing the same interview twice. I had that once. I interviewed the band Against Me for the cover of Magnet magazine, and they flew me to meet them on tour, and the recording didn't come out. And we had to do a repeat on the phone, but it was just demoralizing for everyone involved, you know?
Yeah.
So I thought just better give it a few months and there's more to talk about.
Well, I agree, Taylor. I just interviewed in Heart's Wake, Jake Taylor. Actually, I'm going to his gig tonight at the Crowbar in Leichhardt. And he doesn't know this yet. I'll tell him tonight. My microphone got unplugged from one of my teenagers, one of my 4 children. And so the whole interview, his audio is perfect and mine is just so bad. So I actually re-recorded.
Can you fill yours in?
Yeah, so I actually re-recorded. It took me 3 days. I re-recorded with the earphones on, listening back to what I said, because the interview was so fluid and beautiful. I thought, how can we redo that? So
yeah, totally.
Anyway, let's get to
the tricks of show business, smoke and mirrors. Yeah.
And, you know, I love you. And I mean, in the sense of, I love you. Like, I just absolutely, I've worked with you on so many events and I've loved every moment of it. You are one of the most colourful, creative, inspirational souls that I've worked with. So I just want you to know that I really honour all the work that you've done. And
yeah, we've seen each other through a lot of different stages of evolution.
Haven't we?
And it's nice. I think one of the nice things about being in one industry for a long time, as opposed to jumping around with jobs, is you do get to watch your peers evolve in different ways. And, you know, now there's people who like I did tiny gigs with that are like running major labels, and, you know, and you realize you see the humanity in the journey, and that everyone has a journey, and it's inspiring to watch it.
Yeah, totally. But there's a common circle happening of that creativity keeping us going, isn't it? So how are you doing? Because you've just moved over back to Sydney. How are you doing? How is it going now?
I'm doing good. It's been really interesting. I mean, like, you know, I've moved a few times in my life. I moved to New York when I was 18 or 19, and then moved to LA. But I did those alone. Doing it with a family, and particularly with children, it's really fascinating because, you know, you have vision as a family, but then there's individual needs that need to be met in order to have a fulfilling life. And so you have 4 people taking a leap into the unknown. And it's been really interesting in terms of like the certain pressures I've felt as both as a parent, but also as like the host who's like bringing 3 people to live in Australia. And it's been a real journey, but it's, you know, it's working out. I mean, we're having a wonderful time. I really feel like we are at the early stages of a major boom in the Australian sort of show business economy, and the amount of work that's coming here and creativity, and all these people like me who were living all over the world, who've all come back and want to make their ideas here. It's a new chapter. So, you know, we're feeling our way through all of that.
Yeah, exactly. Because you just got back off a tour, and what was the tour called? Back.
Well, I'm still on it, really.
Okay.
Like, you know, in Australia, different to America. In America, I would go out on tour for like 6 weeks because you can play like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. You know, in Australia, people don't really go to gigs except Thursday, Friday, Saturday night. So I'm really just home and then going and doing gigs on weekends, like weekend warrior stuff. But that tour, I called it the OMG I'm playing gigs again tour.
That's it. Yeah. So let's go there. The OMG I'm playing gigs again. I mean, we've all experienced collectively COVID. Your classic song that everyone, when I say Ben Lee is playing at OneSpace, I always go, Catch My Disease. Oh, of course, So that song really got a whole nother whirlwind during this experience. How have you been feeling, as an artist, as a musician, with this whole experience? The COVID experience. Yeah.
Well, I think it's interesting because the stakes, particularly for us being in LA, in the sort of Trump administration and the just tremendous mishandling of COVID and all of that, the stakes felt so high in day-to-day life. So it wasn't really like the kind of atmosphere of like celebrating, like, hey, people are really into Catch My Disease and we're all in this together again. And, like it didn't feel like time to celebrate personal victories in that way. I'm continuing to talk. I'm just picking up the Uber Eats from the front door while we do that. This is
so cool.
This is
That's
real
rock
life.
and roll, man. Yeah. That's rock and roll.
Yeah. Well, my daughter's home with a scratchy throat. It's so funny because when we were kids, what you had to do to stay home was so intense. Like your parents would never let you stay home, and now it's like post-COVID, you can't show up to school with a runny nose, like even like a mild cold. It's like you're like a leper.
Yeah, exactly. I know. I mean, I've got the twins now, they're 8, and Alex has allergies. And I'm always getting the phone call. I'm like, look, there's a medical certificate. He has allergies, but it's that just any symptom, you've got to go get the COVID test. It's like,
yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So,
okay. She's got her Eats.
So yes. So anyway, so it's a bit hard to sort of like focus on that, but one of the really beautiful things about it was that as a musician, because our culture is so immediate, it's really easy to forget that all art serves a different function at a different time in a different place. And we have to be kind of really patient in order, if we're creators, in order to let our work find its way to its audience at the appropriate time, in order that it like serves the most benefit. It's all very well just to win like athletically and be like, I've got a song on the radio, I'm playing big venues, but really you want to be of service, and you want to make music that's like helpful to people. And so it's interesting to realize like certain songs have kind of a journey that's like potentially like 20 years long or 15 years long in order for them to find their sort of maximum expression of when they're needed. And it's cool. It's given me like a renewed confidence in the long game in terms of making work as an artist, that like it is it's a long journey, and the idea is to contribute things of value, and it's not really up to us to decide when they're going to be most of value.
So it gave you that understanding that, because I mean, ultimately when you create art, you want to know that it's making a difference in people's lives, I guess, and that it's timeless. Yeah. One of the albums that we did together as an album launch over a few nights for Freedom, Love, Recuperation of the Human Mind. That was such a beautiful mouthful to always get right when I was introducing you. One of my favorite songs on that was Enemy Within. I wanted to say, you know, with all that you have seeked and explored, what do you do personally to help you, you know, reflect what do you reflect on when you need to find help, when that mind is taking over?
I mean, for me, like, my marriage is probably like the best compass for me, in the sense that if me and Ione are good, I'm generally good. And I don't mean that like in a codependent way. I just mean like when my marriage is healthy, it's a sign that I'm healthy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? When the marriage is like not struggling, but just feeling blocked or something, it's generally because one of us is like not fully present in a certain way. So I use that a lot as a compass.
Mm.
And quite often me and Ione will just say to each other, hey, can I just process something with you? I just need your mind. I just need your input on this. And that's really a big one. In terms of personally, I play guitar. I mean, I kind of feel at the most basic level, there's a muscle. It's the thing I've done the longest that is like a practice. Each time I pick up I was actually thinking today, I was like, I haven't picked up the guitar for a few days. Because when I'm playing a lot of gigs, it happens. I have sound check in the gig and I'm playing for a couple hours a day. But it's easy to, after a few days, just go, oh, forget about that and get on with life. And I like to pick up the guitar and just play, even if it's like the same old riffs that I've been playing for 30 years, just keep playing them. And then, being in nature, exercise, relaxing, daydreaming. I've come to feel that like in some ways, the entire concept of like meditation is almost like a branding exercise for a world in which there's no time to daydream. In that we should have meditative moments all through our life and all through our day.
Totally.
Where we just like plop down on the couch and let our mind drift and experience who we are and what's in that moment and relax. And so, it's like, I see it as sort of like, there was a long period of my life where I was really obsessed with practices in a way. And at a certain point, I felt that for me, the next step was letting go of all dogmatic ideas about what practices meant or what they were worth, and just going about my day and responding in the moment with what felt authentic.
Being present, isn't it, in those moments? Because I mean, for
Yeah.
me, mindfulness can be in cooking, or being present with my children when they ask me something, to actually look at their eyes and be present with them.
Yeah, and thinking critically about who you are and your own decisions. Like I think there's a lot to be said for thinking through, trying to use like real logic and think through why you feel the way you feel or why you're making a certain decision that you're making. Yeah, I mean, thinking is really undervalued. People talk a lot about, oh, I'm overthinking. Well, maybe you need to do some thinking. It's like thinking is sort of how you get to a solution a lot of the time. And it's like a very powerful train that can go off the tracks pretty easily. But we need to think, and we need to, sometimes when I'm trying to reach a new experience in my life or create a certain experience or something, my main way of achieving it is thinking a lot about it.
Me too.
And like, what would I like? What do I like about that? What would I want that to look like? Who would I want to collaborate with? How do I want it to feel? Just analyzing why I desire the things I desire is like thinking about things it's super powerful.
I mean, there's so much thought in all of your albums. I mean, you can see that you're really a visionary. So it's, there's so much storytelling in your lyrics. I always say that when you come to a Ben Lee concert, it's like you're being narrated a story of your experiences and your thoughts that we can relate
Well, I
to.
always wanted,
Yeah.
I always liked the idea of the types of artists where you didn't have to know the music to have the full experience of the
Mm,
show. You know, like certain artists, it's like they play for the fans. And
yeah.
if you go to a show not as a fan, you're sort of like, I don't know this 12-minute song that everyone's cheering about the drum roll in. You know what I
Yes,
mean?
yes.
Um, and I sort of always aspired to make music that was like, it was like an experience that
Mm,
was, this is the part of me that I think people assume is connected to almost like childlikeness or something. That when you go to see a kid's performance, if you take your kids somewhere, they they know they have to earn the kids' interest.
yep.
There's like no amount of like you just can't be presumptuous when you're performing for children. And I like to perform for the child inside every grown up.
Mm,
And so I want to earn their trust, and I want to engage them. I want to honestly engage them. And I use a lot of different techniques for that. And that's show business, but I like the idea that a normal person who knows nothing about me could come to the show and understand it.
mm,
I don't want people to feel left out in that way.
yeah. I mean, yes, that is what happens at your shows for sure. Where did you find, the purpose of expression? Where did that come from? Because as you can see, you really understand that there's a purpose to expressing. Where do you
Um,
think that came from, that knowingness?
I don't know. I think there's two sides to it. I think
Okay.
there's like almost like a genetic ego, just like habitual side that like I'm sort of extroverted and I share even when I don't have purpose to it. I will babble, like I will talk. I like sharing at a very like basic level that's not necessarily particularly noble. Um, so learning to shut up at times has been part of the process for me too. But the other side of it is that I think that I've sort of always been connected to the purpose before the medium, even, which is why I tend to move through different collaborations and different mediums and stuff, because in some ways I don't care about the medium.
Mm,
In some ways, connection, playfulness, fun, collaboration, those are the actual values.
mm,
And, I spent time recently as a consultant on a comedy show in the writer's room for 3 days. And it was something I'd never done before, but they were writing about some areas that I sort of knew something about. And they invited me in, and I was like, let's do it. Because what really spoke to me wasn't the medium, but the opportunity to be in a new space and to be creative and to have fun and learn. So I think that's what I'm really grounded in. And in some ways, that is quite selfish. It's just about me having fun.
mm.
Um, and I hold that very high on my priority list. Like I like working with smart people doing interesting things. And
Love it.
aside from that, I'll figure out the details later.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, last time I saw you play, talking about collaborating with people was, when they divided the audience at the Enmore Theatre.
Oh yeah,
And
the pub choir.
yeah, I mean, what an amazing, collaborative incentive again. And it was so much fun. Oh my God. I turned up with someone and we got split the moment we walked into opposite sides at the Enmore
Yeah.
Theatre. And, but I mean, I think I emailed you after, such an incredible feeling of connection and joy. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's part of like with them, with pub choir, who are amazing, and
Yeah.
Astrid, who runs it, is, I think she's kind of a genius. But I saw what they were doing, and they were using some of my music,
Yes.
and I know what I want to do in a room, and I was like, we're kind of doing the same thing. We're doing totally different ways of doing it, but we are both trying to elevate this joyful musical experience for people that just regular people.
Mm, mm, mm.
And so I just reached out to them. I said, if there's any scenario you'd want to look at working together and doing a tour, let's talk about it. And they did. And
So
that was a
you
good
reached out
example
to
where,
them, Ben?
yeah, well, they'd already used my song. So we
Yeah,
had a
yeah.
line
I
of
didn't know that.
contact.
Yeah.
But I said, hey, I don't know if there's a way to do this, but there might be a cool way we can do something together.
Yeah.
And again, that was an example where the the motivation came before the details. I didn't know. And then we sort of figured out what could a show look like. And it was really, really fun.
Yeah, it was. I was on such a high after that event, as I am with all your events. My next question is, I mean, I know of all the journeys. Well, I don't know of all the journeys, but I feel like, as we said, I've been on the path for a long time with you. I know the different journeys. We don't have to go into all of that, but I know you've sort of stepped away from a lot of them and closed doors. What is inspiring you now in this present moment? I mean, you're welcome to touch on any of that, but what's inspiring you now? And what are you taking?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like,
what parts are you taking?
Well, spiritual seeking and all that, like from where I stand now, ironically, I look at that as sort of a diversion from spirituality. I think the obsession with, it's almost like the obsession with finding out the truth is the thing that will take you furthest from the truth.
Can you say that again?
There's some,
because I think that's a great part to quote for you.
Well, yeah, the obsession with finding the truth is the very thing that will lead you away from the truth. And I can now see that has been bubbling for a long time. I wrote this song called Sleepwalking on Breathing Tornadoes, the last song. And there's a line in it, it's buried in the chaos, it vanishes as soon as you tell. And that's a very Taoist idea in a sense, that like the Tao that can be spoken is not the Tao. But I think there's a part of me that wasn't ready to accept that life, love, integrity, craftsmanship, responsibility, duty, parenting, friendship, that whatever this thing we call God is in those things. Like there's nothing, there are mysteries to our existence, and they're mysteries and no one knows. Like I like the idea that any human being is telling any other human being, this is what happens when you die, or this is how to live a perfect, I now find it an absurdity. I find the arrogance of it to just be preposterous. So yeah, now I just find the humility of accepting our roles in life and carrying them off with grace and generosity. There's just such deep wisdom in that. I mean, it's kind of like, it's funny because I always had this community of artists around me from when I was 14. These musicians and you know, just people like interesting thinkers and cultural people who invited me into their world. But it's like I wasn't able to realize that like that was my satsang, you know? And so I kept looking for these like spiritual communities where we would like realize we were spiritual. And the last decade I've been like, dude, it's the entertainers. These are my monk brothers and sisters. These are the people who have a practice, who get up on stage night after night and are working through their issues and trying to better themselves. And it's like, I understand those people and they understand me. And the simplicity of that realization of who my community is. We are people that entertain, and we are people that make art, and we want to beautify the world, and we want to make the world more interesting. None of the conventional dialogue around spirituality or community really spoke to that. So I didn't recognize it. And then the last decade or so, it's been more like, oh my God, it was here all the time. This is my community, you know?
I mean, I watched many of you, I observed many of you with the guru, and it was interesting to observe from the outside. So
yeah, I mean, gurus are fascinating psychological studies because they create families, basically. So that sense of community becomes instant. You suddenly have something you can bond with a group about without the risk of actual vulnerability too. You're like, hey, you're in with the guru, I'm in with the guru, let's do it. You know what I mean? But I think that in a sense that is exploited by gurus, because I think gurus realize we all bring dysfunctional family issues to the table on our psychological journeys, and that they can that can lead to people being very easily manipulated into repeating different family dynamics unconsciously, you know.
Completely. I know I was always on the outside of the circle, but I did observe, and it's been interesting watching who's stayed and who's gone.
Yeah, but there's also like, you know, there's the gurus I've been involved with, but there's like all kinds of gurus. Like you realize the ones who get into like Wim Hof and taking ice baths, and the one like, I mean, there's all these gurus that people basically elevate and give away their autonomy to,
Give away their
particularly in the
power.
health and wellness space. Yeah, they give away their power, and they appear to believe that this person knows better than they do what they should do with their lives. And it's and that's what's ironic about, if you look at, we don't want to need to go too far into this, but if you look at the way that a lot of the wellness and new age worlds criticize others for placing science above personal intuition, I was like, I'd rather place science above personal intuition than Bob from down the road, who's basically started an ashram. Like, at least science is like repeatable. At least the premise of what's being said to me can be the experiment can be repeated. I mean,
well, you
in
like
a sense,
facts.
science is like, yeah,
you're intellectual.
It's like, it's fairly, there's room. Look, obviously as an artist, my intuition is like invaluable to me and I rely on it every day.
Yeah.
But like, I'm not going to rely on anyone else's intuition. Let me tell you that much. Like, I'm not going to say, Bob's having an intuition. He's got spirits talking to him. Let me buy a house down the road because Bob's angels are telling. I mean, I just think it's absurd and childish. You know, at least with empirical data, there is an admission that, like, if the data changes, then we'll admit we were wrong and go there. But for now, that's what we know. You know, and I just think it's very ironic how much giving away of power exists in the health and wellness and spirituality space, yet how their clarion call is of personal sovereignty and freedom and independence, when you actually see, like, you know, much more group think than is easy for them to admit to.
Yeah, rather than individuality and following that in self power, that inner power, which is originally where I conceptualized my heart space, because I was observing everyone looking externally and I was sort of almost having a cry out saying, you got to look, you know, it's all in you. You are the guru. you are
totally.
You are
But
your
also,
own guru.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And also, you are wrong sometimes, and you have to take responsibility for that.
And you have to take
responsibility.
responsibility.
Yeah. I mean, I find that really interesting, that like this whole like this whole movement that's like, feel the, you know, like particularly like with QAnon and stuff, like there's this whole idea that just listen to what your heart tells you about the candidates.
Right.
I mean, that's fine, but the heart is very easily manipulated. And unless we realize the limitations of our own intuition also, that it's working with what it knows, but it doesn't always have all the information. And, you know, our intuition can also lead us astray. And basically acknowledging the complexity of the entire psychological landscape, and that none of it's simple and none of it's got super clear answers, and it is extremely susceptible to emotional manipulation.
Well, I'm going to take you here. I don't know.
Yeah, let's do it.
Because
I'm gonna get to the next comfortable position for the next.
Well, one of the other projects we did was ayahuasca Welcome to the Work, and we held that at Paddington Uniting Church. And I remember the police showing. Do you remember that? The police showing up to the event.
Yeah.
I love you. You're lying down. Talk about welcome to the work.
It's funny because Yeah, that was funny. I mean, I find the whole connection between law and order and the feelings of institutions about mind altering substances to be fascinating.
Yeah.
Because clearly they threaten the order of society. That's not inaccurate. Like, I think for governments to feel that psychedelics are a threat, or even cannabis to an extent, I think they're pretty right on about that, because I think substances can make you question the arbitrary nature of some of the rules of the etiquettes of a society that we live in. Now, I personally feel that it's a human right to test the boundaries of our own reality, you know. But I look at the battle against mind altering substances from a legal standpoint, and it's not that mysterious to me.
Mm.
Like, I think I think there is a fundamental, I think, for instance, psychedelics and capitalism are fundamentally at odds.
Mm.
And I think it's interesting watching corporations attempting to co-opt psychedelics now, with microdosing and patents and all that
Yep.
stuff that's going to become more and more of a thing. And I'm interested to see how it's going to play out. But I definitely think it's interesting that microdosing is the thing that is breaking through to the corporate side.
Yeah.
Because it is, in a sense, there's a colonial, it's possible to bring in your colonial attitudes to microdosing. Whereas with peak breakthrough experiences,
Breaking open. Yeah.
your internal colonization of your mind is like, it becomes totally redundant.
Yeah.
And that is revealed. So this is sort of a battle that we're going to watch play out over the next few decades, and I'm very interested to see where it goes.
Mm. Well, again, I observed the movement of, I mean, it's still going, but ayahuasca, I observed all the gatherings, and I actually never participated, to be honest. But during, you know, how do you, and even do you, how do you now connect with spirit, and what is spirit to you through all these experiences?
I tend not to rely on much language to define my
Yep.
relationship to those things.
Yep.
I think in some ways fun is the best compass, and fun can be scary fun too. I think there's a reason why some people find it really fun to jump out of planes. That not all fun is like giggling. Fun is also adrenaline. So I think adventure is fun too, and you know, but fun, and it can also be tender. Like, there's fun in genuine intimacy between people. So I, to me,
because Ben, one of your songs on that, in the silence, I love that song.
Yeah,
that you did with it. Jessica Chapnick featured
Yeah.
on that. Yeah. So yeah, is that moments where you do connect? Do you still find that in the silence?
yeah,
Yeah, good.
yeah, and I find that fun. So that's kind of one of the things that I think it's really funny, because when I think about like psychedelics, like when you take out all the sort of hoo-ha from it, of like, you know, whatever, it's mythology, that the spirit plant and the this and that, and you know, the way all this stuff's talked about,
Ritual
and
and
I really go at a basic level, what do I like about those things? I come to the blasphemous answer, I think they're fun.
You're like a big kid, honestly.
Well, you know, it's like,
Good.
but it's honest. It's honest. Yeah. It's like, when I think about like, why did I take such an anti-Trump stance? Because he's no fun. He's a dingbat that made life depressing and scary for most people in the world. And it's like, I'm sorry, dude, you're like a giant party pooper. And I'm not saying like necessarily an opposition party has all the perfect answers, but I don't believe in bullying. And I think like bullies are no fun.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. All right. Well, now we're going to go over to love. I mean, your relationship is inspiring. I mean, I don't hang out with you both. You've just come back to Australia, but you can feel it, and it's been a long relationship, and there seems like there's still joy and intimacy and love between you. We like
to chat, you know?
Yeah. Play games.
It's like last night I was because she's in Melbourne. She's shooting something, coming back and forth, and we're on the phone yesterday, just like babbling away about something. And I was like, oh my God, it's like we're like 13 years into our relationship, and I still just want to chat to her.
Isn't it the best? To me, it's like your best
really
friend.
Good.
Your best friend.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
And it feels like you both feed off each other's inspiration, and you've got a lot to talk about.
Well, you know, our first date we went to see a documentary about John and Yoko. And it was almost like built into our courtship was this idea of creative partnership and two artists living together and wanting to bring out the best in each other. And, you know, it's just sort of, it's what I think what we were both interested in.
Definitely, that absolutely, you know, embodies what you are, that two creative souls, but allowing each other, it feels like going on your own journeys and your own paths without judgment, just that acceptance and allowance.
Yeah. And look, you know, there's also times where I think in a good long-term relationship, you have to challenge each other.
Yeah.
And that's part of why it works, because you call each other on things and just be like, are you sure your reasoning behind that is totally sound? And who better to call you on that than someone who witnesses you every day over years?
Yes.
So yeah.
How do you explain love? I mean, I'm going to bring up another song that I'm going to share with everyone on the Love is the Great Rebellion, the body of love. How do you explain love?
I'm not sure. I mean, it's like, for me, I guess that's why they say people have different love languages, because I think the way we experience love is sort of different. For me, the meeting place of commitment and spontaneity is where love exists. It exists like that in my music. Like, I'm not somebody who operates, like, I like frameworks. Like, I work within pop songs, which are basically similarly structured every time I do them for 30 years. They basically go verse, chorus, instrumental, bridge, chorus, end. You know, it's like, it's pretty boring, right? You know, it's like there's a groundedness in that. But then I also feel freedom within that framework is like incredibly important to me. And I like to push into new spaces with that framework. And I feel like similarly with marriage, the stability of the connection and the sense of duty and the sense of knowing that you're going to do this, the commitment, and then the playfulness of going, it's almost like getting a remote control car and going like, what can we do with this thing? Like, that freedom to me is like, I need that in it too. Otherwise it becomes boring. You know what I mean?
I've never heard someone explain marriage like a remote control car.
Well, it's like, I heard,
I love it.
One of the things that inspired me before I got married, someone who was married said, I just think you can do more together than alone.
Yes.
And I understood how like two heads are better than one. Like, whether it's career or obviously like the functioning of a house. If you have two people helping with it, it's better than one. You know, it's hard to do by yourself. I mean, there are people who do it very successfully, but we're not isolated individuals as humans. We're like, and there's people who argue actually we should be in communities, and even two is not enough. But
yeah, well, going back to that,
growing up where you have the village and everyone raising each other's kids, and neighborhoods, and all that stuff is really important. But that sort of after something, like, in terms of, like, I do think there is almost like a biohacking thing to do with relationships, that, like, they're effective. You know what I mean? Like, you get it done in relationships. I do think, and again, these are just my experience, but I find that, like, you can be very effective in a team.
Yeah, I've got these good friends that play soccer with my son, and they're like moving interstate, and I'm like, how's it going? Oh, we've got the spreadsheet, one of us has done it, selling the property, we got it. And I'm like, wow, go team, like, power couple.
And you bring different talents,
strengths,
yeah, totally. There's a lot of things that, while we consult on, we also trust each other on. And if one of us has, like, a strong sense of how something should be done, or, like, the other goes along with it, because we've proven ourselves to each other, and we've proven our limitations too.
Yeah, for sure. How long have you been married now?
Well, Goldie's going to be 12 this year, so we'll have been married 13 years.
Or together, sorry. I shouldn't even say just
married. 15 years.
Beautiful.
It'll be this year, yeah.
Well, what I wanted to finish up today was just mentioning what you've got going on at the moment, but weirder together. I mean, that's like a good segue of what we're just talking about. How's this going? And I saw you chatting, I think it was to I can't remember which show it was, but I saw you chatting about it. Sounds like an amazing event. Good, how's it going?
So it's good. So basically, like, there was this venue in LA called Largo, and we would do hosting shows there, and it was a real, like, hub for community and the mixing of, like, musicians and comedians and interesting people. And we always, it's sort of like a just creatively, like, there was a clubhouse atmosphere, and we would do great things with, like, Sarah Silverman and Judd Apatow and the Watkins and Grant Lee Phillips, and just interesting, like, people, and it's one of the things that made LA special to us, and still makes LA special to us. And we were just like, we need to kind of get that going out here, like, because I think, especially coming out of 2020, the sense of community is really important. And also the sense of art or events that exist for more than just commercial reasons, So we just started, Ione and I are hosting this monthly night at Giant Dwarf Theatre in Surrey Hills, and it's called Weirder Together. And it's they've been great. Like, the next one on May 5th, like, sold out the day we put it on sale. So people can get on my mailing list at bendashley.com, and we do the pre-sales through that every month, so people get a chance to get tickets, because it's a small theater. It's like 150 people. And basically, when you go, you have no idea who's going to be there. You just know me and Ione are hosting. But, like, the first month we had Andrew from Wolfmother, Josh Pike, Ben Law, Bridget Delaney, Cameron James, just great people, like, coming up and doing stuff, and all like really top level. And one of the things that's cool is you realize that so we also don't let people film, because we also want it to be a space where people can try things, like comedians and musicians, like, should feel free to, like, be creative in front of an audience and try out material for, like, 10 minutes, whatever, without feeling like it's all going to end up on Instagram. So just about protecting that. And it's been, really, really cool.
So they can go over to your website, and you've got actually quite a lot of gigs coming up all across Australia. And then you're going to, so it's all on his website. I will share that link. And then you're going to be supporting the Whitlams. Is that with Emily Waramara as well?
Yeah, she's doing some too. Yeah.
Okay.
It's funny because there's all these shows that, like, I booked during 2020 and in quarantine, when I couldn't imagine doing shows. And now I'm like, damn, okay, now I got to actually play all these shows.
There's a lot of shows, Ben.
Yeah, it's a lot of shows.
Swung on my seat. Oh, that's exciting. Well, it's been I'm going to let you get back to Goldie and back to your day. Thank you
cool.
so much for hanging out with me and doing
Yeah.
the OneSpaceLove show. It's been beautiful to have you on.
Yeah. Good to talk to you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Speak to you soon.
Your space, your space, my space, our space. OneSpaceLove, OneSpaceLove, OneSpaceLove.